All right. Good. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is July 6th, 2026. This is the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Please let the record reflect that in the conference room, we have Commissioners Jordan, Waldrop, and Kearns. We'll be joined shortly by Commissioner Brooks. So we're going to kick things off and we will hand it on down to Scott Chesney with a discussion of our housing allocations for 2026 comp plan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We do have slides for you. They're also in your packet. What we're going to go over is the housing allocation to the jurisdictions by income bands. This is coming back to you for probably the third or fourth time. This time, though, it comes with a recommendation from the Steering Committee of Elected Officials for adoption of the tool using housing unit allocations rather than population unit allocations. This has been a result of the methodology that this board adopted January of 2025, and then discussions throughout 25 and 26 by the Steering Committee, by the Planning Technical Advisory Committee, and the Planning Commission over the two major allocations, resulting in a recommendation from the Steering Committee to use the housing input model, which most of the other jurisdictions have used, not all, and there was no, even at the Steering Committee level, there is no actual consensus on the model itself. There was some disagreement from various jurisdictions. Going forward, the two models generally, in the simplest sense, the population input model allocates about 23,000 dwelling units to Spokane County UGA lands and about 3,500 to rural. It does require us to accommodate more housing units in the lower income bands, 0 to 50 area median income, and includes rural allocations in the 50 to 120 AMI bands. The housing input approach allocates about 20,000 dwelling units in the urban growth area and about 6,000 to the rural areas. We are also proposing, and it was part of supported by the Steering Committee recommendation, to move roughly half of those rural units into an urban classification. And the advantage to the county is that means there's about 3,000 fewer units in that 0 to 50 AMI band, which is just so much easier for the county to accommodate on the edges. And then there's 0 rural allocations in the total 0 to 120 AMI bands. They're all in the 120 and up.
In the rural.
Correct, in the rural areas. So the Steering Committee did hold a legally noticed public hearing on June 17th. The PTAC had earlier recommended support for this approach. Members of the public were there at the public hearing and expressed support for both options. After deliberations by the Steering Committee, they reached a majority view of the voting members in attendance and recommended Board of County Commissioners adoption of the housing unit input allocation for the jurisdictions by income band. The Steering Committee vote was 13-2, and that we would be asking for you to receive that recommendation at your legislative meeting July 14th and consider it at your meeting on July 21st. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. This has been winding through the system for 15 months or so, and we're looking forward to putting this one to rest. This will also have implications later on how we work with our DEIS and the urban growth areas. So anyway, again, happy to take questions.
Can you remind me if we're to adopt what was recommended by the Steering Committee, which included moving some of our units in the county from rural to the UGA.
Correct.
Why does that, just remind me, why does that result in fewer units for very low income? Housing? That because you're accommodating in the urban rather than in the rural. Okay.
That's basically
Okay.
true, and the allocations change between the two major inputs as well. But it is chiefly because we're accommodating those inside the
Which
urban.
makes more sense in terms of being able to provide services to very low income individuals.
And that's, our next item, as we talk about the DEIS and the alternative one approach to rezoning. That is the tool we can use to accommodate these within the urban growth area. Which, and when we get to that, I think is fairly exciting for the county because counties are really struggling with how to deal with these lower income bands in inherently suburban development.
Are we required to take the steering committee's recommendation?
That's probably a question for Matt, but technically, no. The Board of County Commissioners can make its mind up in any way it chooses.
That's correct.
Okay,
In any way it chooses, it needs to be supported by the record.
okay. Would it be supported by the record that we set back in, I believe it was January of 2025? When we passed a resolution to use A prime with a sheet attached showing population being the numbers used in the formula?
I would not recommend relying on that
No.
if the board decides to deviate from the steering committee and the PTAC recommendation.
Okay.
Usually, if the board wants to deviate from the planning commission or the steering committee, where you accept their recommendations, you can handle it in a normal manner. If not, you would need to hold your own public hearing to consider an alternate approach.
Okay.
Which we will help you do.
One final question. You said that not every jurisdiction, which jurisdictions did not use the housing input approach? Because I'm not.
Deer Park is the one that is most
Okay,
clearly to use the population allocation projections. We're not quite sure of Cheney because they did their work so early on before everybody else really moved down the path. It looks like they may have come back to the housing unit allocation.
okay. Is that gonna change anything for Deer Park?
Not substantially. And it's, I mean, not to be, any animosity or anything toward the smaller jurisdictions the jurisdictions and the allocations are relatively small and the changes are relatively easy to accommodate. And it's important to remember that these are allocations to meet a Growth Management Act objective. The market is going to react to this in the ways that markets are going to react. So we don't think there's a negative impact for Deer Park.
And that's why the steering committee's been discussing whatever number gets agreed upon. It does need to be consistent with each city's planning process.
Yes.
But then we've been discussing maybe doing at the 5-year or even earlier review. Looking at how the market reacts and then making potential alterations to the to where population is going.
That's correct. The steering committee is considering a countywide planning policy that would memorialize that monitor and reporting system on an annual basis, so we could keep track in as much as you can in real time and growth on how they balance. It would likely be something that would start to show up in year probably 3, but that would give us time to react by the 5-year check-in for the plan.
That's what a lot of other urban counties have been doing on the west side for years, right?
The counties that participate in the buildable lands program use this. It's called targeted reconciliation on their side, and it's more of a constant effort where they are literally monitoring all of their growth on an annual basis and shifting among themselves when they adjust. That's part of the buildable lands approach. That's generally the counties that are in the Puget Sound Regional Council, because they also use that as terms of multi-county block planning policies. The Spokane County and our jurisdictions are considering asking for your consideration on becoming part of the Buildable Lands Program, because frankly, I think we're big enough to do that. And this very issue is probably going to come up every time we're trying to do allocations. And it would be nice to have something memorialized that is GMA compliant to let us make these adjustments if we need to. And the challenge, I think we've been clear from the very part, the population share versus the housing allocation share moved, 4,000 or 5,000 allocation from the county into the city of Spokane. And that was done on Commerce's explanation that 60% of that number was for actual new growth, 30% was to make up for existing housing shortages, and 10% was to cover homeless population. And so it skewed heavily toward the city itself. So that's how that number changed. The city's EIS says they intend, or they expect roughly 3/4 of their new growth to be in the lower rental or the lower income rental housing units, not in owner occupied housing. That is somewhat consistent with where they've been for the last few years, but is also reflective of sort of a skewed balance between those that want to build owner occupied housing and those that are wanting to live in residences or in apartments. They have constructed their preferred alternative so that this multifamily emphasis can be done in their centers and corridors approach, which is where most of that density is already built in and has the infrastructure to do it. We had challenged the single family part of that on the simple fact that if you were to scrape, a block of bungalows on the south of the North Hill and replace it with 96 or 120 units of housing, that infrastructure wasn't designed. And the capital facilities have to be in line with your projections as you go forward. So by putting it into their centers and corridors, they have a defensible argument on their EIS. But it's also one of historically reacting to growth in Spokane County. It's growth of 4.5 units an acre, single family detached houses with the preferred model. If even the city's growth targets, if they can't meet those are going to shift to county lands because the market will push them to the county lands. And so we have to take that into account in looking at our own contingency planning. So, the long and winding explanation is, while we're making these allocations that are consistent with Commerce's request and are consistent with GMA compliance, the market is going to react in ways to serve the product that they believe they can sell, that people want to buy.
I'm not on the steering committee.
Slides.
When you say 13-2 was the vote in favor of housing, is that just, do all the cities have a seat on that?
There are 15
Who's the
members.
makeup?
Yes, it's the county has 3 votes or 3 members. The city of Spokane has 3. The city of Spokane Valley has 2. Deer Park, Airway Heights, Genie, Medical Lake, Liberty Lake all have 1. And then there's 1 representative to represent the 5 loose towns.
And the city of the Valley favored the housing allocation as well. So do we have a draft EIS out? Published?
Yes, it was published first part of last month. The comment period, it closes later this week, July 11th.
And does that, to the outlines of that, we use the housing numbers to plug in to that draft?
We did.
Okay.
We did. Those were the generally accepted numbers at the time, and we used those to direct our consulting team for the traffic and EIS modeling.
So if the board approves the steering committee recommendation, do we have to make any changes to that? Okay.
What about the movement from rural to urban area? Does that change anything in our EIS?
It does technically, and there's kind of there's a broader issue. EIS work has become so very precise over the years because of the way it works, and yet we're talking about what we call a non-project action in a plan. it's a plan that that shows a range of densities in areas rather than a project specific that says I'm gonna build 96 units of apartment on that site and it's gonna have traffic going in and out of that site. So the precision of the EIS will have to be adjusted for these 3,000 residents, but the practical impact is pretty minor. We would simply do that as part of the final EIS rather than go back and do any further study in the DEIS. We don't think it's necessary to do that in the DEIS.
Because you created. In the EIS, there's a range of options of density, right?
Correct.
And so if you have to accommodate 3,000 more folks. Likely you're gonna have more density options,
It's
right?
likely, it was designed to be within what we call the two bookends. You know, one was one, and we'll talk about that later this morning. One is entirely infill. Can you meet your growth accommodation with no change to your UGA by simply changing your development regs? And the other is, what if you keep your historic pattern and don't change your regs? And then that would require UGA lands to be processed. In both of these, that 3,000 allocation is almost certain. It's probably like a 99% certainty it will fall somewhere between those two bookends, which means it will not have to require any new study from the EIS. We built that in to be as flexible as we could for your decisions.
I have one question about the cities, you were talking about the city is accommodating in their proposal. A lot of growth in terms of rental unit.
Roughly 74% of their forecast.
If there was more condo reform at the state level, could that change the model in terms of home ownership opportunities?
Well, of course, it would likely have.
To me, that seems like the big elephant in the room, like,
Sure.
how do you accommodate people of all these different income levels? And people who wanna purchase homes, and yet we in Washington State have condo laws that are very difficult to build, home ownership units,
The
right?
condo law has gotten just slightly more flexible now,
But-
12 units.
Well,
You know, you can do a 12-unit building and not be subject to the liability, that long tail of liability that's on the rest of it. That would have an effect in every county if that ultimately was fully reformed. It would probably not have much of an effect on these housing allocations because we're doing these based on a commerce formula. It might shift those that might buy a single family home in Liberty Lake, they might now buy a condo downtown. Yeah. No, but it wouldn't really have any impact. And because the law isn't going to change in the short term horizon, it would have no impact on the housing allocations that you would be making now.
I was just bringing that up, because it's a frustration that a lot of those units could be built to be, you know, ownership model, but
Well, the project.
builders are not gonna build that with these liability concerns.
The project going up on the riverfront downtown is going to be a rental project until such time as the law changes. It's, you know, it's being built to be sold, but it can't be. You know, practically speaking, the liability is too high.
Scott, a few weeks ago, when you came and presented on this, you had presented an option where there would be allocations that were moved from, I think it was the city of Spokane, the Valley, and from Airway Heights, sort of the three jurisdictions who saw increases when we moved from population to housing unit, sort of shifting it so there wouldn't be additional work that would be necessary for those jurisdictions.
Right.
That wasn't presented when we got to the steering committee. I was under the impression that was gonna be one of the options that was presented to the whole steering committee, and it wasn't. What happened?
The PTAC was wholly unsupportive of that. And their reflection and Commerce's at the technical side was what that is doing is creating a fourth option that had not been fully vetted the way the other two or three options had been done, so it wasn't presented.
Okay.
We talked about a timeline for our state lobbyist RFP. Does anybody know?
It's ready to
Now,
go,
right?
Heather has it. Just need to do a quick follow up to see if you guys ready for people out.
It just seems like it's a good time. We could kind of get another condo bill together, you know, like look at other states' laws that have a higher uptake of condo stock in their market and figure out what the tweak is and get a bill going, you know, early. So,
But I don't think that wouldn't impact what we're doing, because this is housing units, not
yeah,
a different,
Yeah, it
it
wouldn't
doesn't
impact this.
differentiate between rental or
right, it
home
wouldn't
ownership.
impact the allocation, but
No.
it would impact the actual results of all this plan, I think, going forward, so.
We'll do the conversation of how do we support more. Homeowners.
Oh, absolutely. It's a missing tool in all of our ability to provide that particular housing. And as everybody knows, downtown Spokane has so much vacant land. It would be a good market if there was a chance to do that. Right, Chair, anything else?
Anything else on this? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on. Well, we want to talk about the EIS, generally speaking, land use. And while it may seem a little premature, we are in the fourth quarter, I guess, of our game to produce a new comprehensive plan. We've got a lot that's all coming together now, both in the EIS and in other aspects of it. What we'll be talking about over the next 60 days is the land use, transportation, economic development side of our argument. You can see on the slides, the future land use map is composed of a whole synthesis of elements. Population growth projections are one of them, land capacity, available capital facilities, critical areas are a guiding aspect of that, and of course, market factors. We have to the degree we can, we have to understand where the market's going and how we can plan for that within the parameters of the Growth Management Act. Next slide, please. As always, these maps are very hard to read up on the screen. Generally speaking, this is the land capacity analysis in the various colors around the UGAs on the outside. Next, please. And then, yeah, and that's that land capacity analysis is one of the foundation documents for planning for the comp plan update, because as you know, we have to address the remaining vacant and underutilized lands within the UGA before we can consider changing the UGA. So we have to go through that analysis, which you've seen in 2024 and 2025. The DEIS published June 7th. The comment period ends July 11th. And then we will be looking at that to guide quite a lot of where that land use element, the land use chapter comes together, and that will guide the future land use map. Next slide, please. One of the key things that is different in this plan than in 2015 is the 2017 plan, which was adopted in 2020, is a much more robust look at critical areas, including expanding those to stormwater flooding areas. And we've illustrated here is an area of stormwater flooding on the West Plains area. There are also areas on the north side of the Metro Core and on the southeast side of the city of Spokane, in the Moran Prairie, Glen Rose area have stormwater issues. And so these are areas that in the past have been looked at as things to be mitigated. We're now seeing some of the results of that from 20 years in the past where there were no mitigations, and certainly that's illustrative of the West Plains, especially the West Terraces, which is in the lower left corner of that orange map on the left side, where they've had challenges over the years because the aquifer basement rock, as it's called, is so high in that area that water can't percolate. And so it can't flow, it can't go anywhere, so it just floods. That level of critical areas really suggest areas that we should try to you know, perhaps not so much not build, but at least go in with wide open eyes on what's it gonna take to do this and what are the impacts if we continue to build in the same way in these zones. So this will have a really healthy effect on where we are gonna be able to plan to build in the future that we haven't used in quite such a past.
Good question on that.
Yeah.
So when you say with wide open eyes, what does that mean in terms of like a policy or approach that might be different than the past?
It would mean, generally speaking, we would work with our public works colleagues to update the Eastern Washington Stormwater Manual. We would change some of the geotechnical requirements for building permits or plats, perhaps rather, upfront rather than building permits themselves, to take into account a hydrological study, that we understand what is on and under the ground before we plat it. So it'll add will make engineers happy. There'll be billable hours in here, but it will provide a level of scientific, as we've tried to do with everything in the critical area ordinances being updated. We're using what are called best available science, best practices. Those will be updated to take into account these critical areas in a more robust way than they have been in the past. And more to the point, they'll be connected through the comprehensive plan instead of we're here in one ordinance, over here in an engineering study, and over here somewhere else. They'll be all in one place. So somebody looking to build or plan in an area will get full and complete information when they come through our shop, and they won't have to go multiple places. Explains.
So just a quick follow-up on that, so does that assume, so then when you identify these areas and identify the need for more research and policy around the permitting side of it, does that impact the number of homes that would likely be built? That,
It
I
certainly
mean,
could.
you take that, is that part of the
Yes.
EIS consideration? Okay.
Yes, if, for example, and there have been in terms of comprehensive plan amendments on the West Plains alone, moving from single family or low density residential to medium or high density residential. If you're creating more impervious surface on the same piece of land, that's going to have a deleterious effect on stormwater management because you have no place for it to percolate. You're not building retention or detention ponds. So what that might suggest is you're gonna have to have a bigger piece of land because you're gonna have to manage this on site, or you're gonna have to use the scope of the project, spread it over a bigger area of some kind. So it will have an effect. But if you put it in sort of the context of the condo law, if you know these hazards going in and you can accommodate or you can plan for them in a way, you're taking away the liability down the road when something bad happens that you didn't otherwise plan for.
But it might mean because you have to provide more land for stormwater management. That you wouldn't be able to build as much, maybe.
Yes, in the sense of a limited area, if the critical areas are going to affect the land use in that limited area, it will limit the amount of growth that can go there.
Do you see a potential for like a county owned or operated kind of stormwater? Like up on the Upper South Hill, where the city has that whole area behind Ferris High School, that's like
Hazel's Creek.
right, that was kind of developed to be able to accommodate more growth. But it's managed as part of the city's stormwater system.
It's actually a joint city-county project. It's in the city to be sure, but it's both
But then
governments.
developers could use
Could that be replicated somewhere else?
developments.
Sure.
And then put stormwater into that combined facility.
Yes. Yeah, and that's.
Anyway, something to be thought of,
It's
because you
a
could
good
develop
example.
more. If you had a combined system, developers could buy into that,
Absolutely. It's a good model. Next slide, please. And sort of maybe coincidentally, this represents, again, very countywide maps, but within the red circle, this is the an updated aquifer protection area map. The Spokane Valley Rastrum Prairie aquifers in blue, What you're seeing in the red circle are the now defined paleo channels that crisscross the West Plains and the Grand Ronde aquifer system that exists out in the West Plains. In today's paper, talking about a new aquifer protection area for the West Plains, finally identifying that this aquifer system out here is unique. It's distinct from the Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie, and it needs protection going forward, even though the protection area really is not so much addressing the PFAS and the contamination issues. But this, this is what we say about best available science. We didn't use some of this information in the past. The paleo channels, we've known have been there, for sure, but they didn't necessarily factor into land use plan. Now they will. But it's another piece of knowledge that we have going forward. Next, please. So this is sort of a summary of the kind of the environmental analysis. When you're looking at land, pervious surfaces, hazardous areas, and then habitat, the big issues. You can kind of see how they connect in the various elements, from erosion and water quality to reduced infiltration, increased runoff, and slope instability, and then habitat fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation is also not just an esoteric issue. It's important for the overall ecological health of the county. The rural conservation lands that permeate the county were defined generally by habitat management because of movement of both on land and above the land. And so those are also taken into account in this more critical approach to looking at land development. Next, please. So the key we've identified, or we call the the takeaways of the EEIS. The environmental analysis informs the plan policy and development standards. Impacts are driven where and how development occurs. Best available science defines the level of protections, and then the CAO, our ordinance, defines how those are applied to protect. So it all starts to pull together, resulting in two major elements. One is the comprehensive plan, and the second is the critical areas ordinance, which is, along with our other development, are the actual rules on how something gets developed. So in a nutshell, that slide substitutes for 600 pages of DEIS document. There's a lot in there. So the alternatives, how do we translate this now into a growth strategy? As we've said before, we've got three alternatives, one being no action, the second the infill, and the third is the UGA analysis. This is where we studied specific parcels based on a series of criteria, some of which are defined in the Growth Management Act, some of which are defined by us in the county. That resulted in several hundred candidate parcels. And this slide identified that we would be looking at about 600 acres in addition to the remaining UGA land to study or to accommodate to accommodate growth in this alternative. That's what we're starting to narrow down. Next, please. And this is a comparison of kind of the bookends, as we've said. Which you can see is on the 0 to 80% AMI columns. Both alternatives have a shortfall or a deficit in those lower income numbers, and they show a general surplus in the 80 to 120 plus parcels. These are critical because to accommodate the deficit, we have to balance that in these income bands with available growth. And we made the citation here to the Mercer Island case. We can't also concentrate them in only a few or single locations. They have to be more widely considered to allow for things for developments to take place. One tool that the cities use is the multifamily tax exemption, which now they've expanded to be citywide, where formerly it was in downtown cores and some of the distressed parcels. And that way you can accommodate this, or at least what it does is it doesn't prohibit that development in all areas of the city, and it allows for a tax incentive up to 20% for 12 or even more years if you accommodate that. To do that in the county's side, we need land. We need to be able to spread things around so that we can have, for example, in alternative one, which we're going to show you several maps here in a minute. If we want to accommodate these deficits and we don't want to concentrate them in areas that have been now shown to be not in compliance with GMA, we have to spread them out in areas that make sense. And that's going to take some extra land to do that. And that's where that 600 acres comes in. So next slide, please. These are study alternatives of our major parts of our existing urban growth area. This is north side, that is just north of the Y. Diagonal line on one side is Newport Highway, the other is the old 395 or Division Street. Whitworth University is off to the left. And so what you can see in this map is current zoning, and there's a lot of flavors in there, from low density residential to higher density residential, mixed use, commercial zones, and even some light industrial zones. What we're proposing is the 3 zones called neighborhood residential 1, neighborhood residential 2, and neighborhood business that would be mixed use zones. And in this area, this would be kind of a candidate for that neighborhood business zone, where a lot of the businesses are here, and we would allow for generally multifamily housing to go in as a matter of by right. So we showed you an example of infill on a parking lot at one time. That's the kind of thing that can happen here. This is a good area for that because it already has some transit, and it's being planned for much more robust transit in very short order. It's a study the county and the city have worked on together over the last couple of years. So we're going to have some services in the area. We're going to have transit in the area. It could be a good candidate for what we're not. Next, please. This is a little bit north of that. Again, it's already a commercial corridor, but it's going to transition as Division Street moves away and the North Spokane corridor ultimately gets fully commissioned and introduced. So it's an area that can handle something more like a village aspect, or what we want to see in these neighborhoods, as opposed to subdivisions and separate areas. So that same idea, this is going to have some capacity. This will be one of those areas that will have that higher density infill. Next, please. And then now as an alternative, this is going to be proposed as mostly neighborhood residential 2, which is that allowing a variety of architectural types and densities within an area. This is an area kind of in the Hastings Farwell corridor, again, Newport Highway on the diagonal on the lower part of that. It's been an area in change for the last 5 years. You can see those slightly darker colors under the hatched areas. Those have all been comprehensive plan amendments, moving from low density to medium or high density residential. So the area the market has been changing by itself up here. It's linked to the Division corridor on the far left of that slide. The red triangle is a 40-acre potential mixed-use site. And importantly, what's now the mixed-use site across or south of Newport Highway, and you can see where it is, that little sort of right-of-way L, if you will. That's Costco on the highway. Behind that is the Meatworks land by Greenstone, which is a mixed-use 1,500 unit project. But along Newport Highway, excuse me, is going to stay commercial, some big box, but to the northeast of Costco, there was 40 acres that was purchased by Multicare a couple of years ago, and 10 acres of that subsequently sold to Shriners Hospital. That is, and we've been in touch with them, that is going to be a major medical center over the coming years. probably within the horizon of this plan. So it will be an employment center, it'll be a major medical center. Shriners will have a presence up there. Spokane Transit is planning a station adjacent to that as part of this high capacity transit area. So this is really gonna be what in some places you call polycentric cities. This is gonna be a true neighborhood village, almost of its own, probably within the 20 or 25-year horizon. So it's a great candidate for this kind of infill approach on its own.
Rebecca, can you back up one slide? Scott, as I'm looking at the hatched part on this one, I was trying to, that's pretty built out already.
Yes, it's more of a, this is more of a redevelopment approach,
Okay,
where smaller shops, smaller buildings that ultimately maybe losing some of their economic or technological relevance can be acquired, bought, rebuilt.
okay.
This is more of an urban redevelopment strategy.
Okay, cause yeah, I was trying to picture where there's really undeveloped land in that hatched in there. There's not, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you've got. Yeah, I mean, I just think that's really built out in there, so, okay, so it's redeveloped, not.
And it
new
was,
development,
we've
okay.
studied it also as part of the transit study, because one of the lines goes right up there and then turns kind of on that Farwell right away. We also think as, you know, in somewhere in the 2031 to 2036 horizon, but when we're getting to our 5-year check-in on this, the North Spokane corridor will be connected to I-90, and Division will start to transition away from being a state highway into a local street, albeit a pretty massive local street. That's been part of the transit study, but it's going to suggest that this area may change because the uses are going to change.
Okay,
So,
okay,
but yes, you've correctly hit on the fact there's not a lot of vacant land there, so it's a redevelopment approach.
okay,
Moving toward the West Plains, our other major area of likely infill zoning. This is an area south, Hatch Part again, south of I-90 between the Garden Springs and Geiger interchanges. Most of that Lilac area is currently light industrial. That was part of a proposed 2022 comprehensive plan amendment for a mixed use project. That was pulled from the consideration at the time in view of waiting for this plan. This is one that could again be that neighborhood business or neighborhood residential too, or a combination of that, because there is quite a lot of residential in the western part of that area already. Thorpe Road comes back through there. We've got some things happening. But the neighborhood business approach is designed for workforce housing as much as anything else. There are already a number of industries out here. Some are manufacturing, some are distribution, some are, some like automobile, like reports. But that business approach would allow, with design standards, would allow the integration of residential in a true walk to work approach. It would be a chance to provide housing in areas where people would not have to have a car to be able to get to a job. And in a slightly longer horizon, there is transit. The transit right now is on the north side of I-90. But it comes down through here and then goes, and we'll see another slide later. In discussions with STA, this is a very, very direct way of retrofitting or adding new transit routes and services on the south side of I-90 to make this transit friendly for future development.
Quick question. On each of these, it says neighborhood study zone, so is it looking at neighborhood business specifically, or potentially any of those three?
We set it up to be any of the three at the study level. Now that we're getting EIS results and we're getting comments back, that's going to help shape which does it become. But in this case, it's likely to be the neighborhood business approach because of what's already there.
And can you just give the quick version of each of those three, just so I'm remembering what those
Sure.
are again?
Neighborhood residential 1 is essentially It's our current LDR and MDR with the required state mandates that we've received over the last 2 or 3 sessions that allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. It's a slightly more flexible version of the combined LDR and MDR. It's really designed almost as a protection zone for areas within the UGA that are mostly built out, but might have a few outlots remaining to try to ensure that what's built in those outlots character of the existing neighborhood, but within, like I said, our new state mandates. Neighborhood residential 2 is more of what we call the master plan, that you start and you plan the piece of land to include that range of residential architecture, and it would have requirements for mix of use in it. It could be 80% can be residential, 20% must be small business in small footprint shops. Wouldn't have to be retail or service, it could be small business, but would have to have a non-residential component planned from the very beginning. Neighborhood business is a little bit of a flip of that. It's recognizing that there are areas that are predominantly retail, commercial, industrial with large parking lots that could be infilled with residential construction. We showed an example of a 1960s mall that transitioned its parking lots into street front residential, structured parking, and minor buildings behind it. It would be a chance of putting more residential and planned it with pathways and connections into areas that currently have a lot of extra land or underutilized land. Another example from city here, when Target was put in up on the South Hill, the Southgate neighborhood, that's in the centers and corridors area, but the market wasn't ready for a multi-story Target, for example. But that was planned, and it looks very simple. But with the central drive, instead of just the flanking ones, it was designed so that the parking lots in Target can be split into residential paths that are each about 20,000 square foot, which is kind of a sweet spot for multifamily. So that was designed to evolve into a more urban focused area over time. The challenge up there at the time is the real opportunity for that kind of infill development is really down at Lincoln Heights Shopping Center, 29th and Rego, because you've got a 360-degree market of customers around you. Out at Palouse, you're nothing but low density, big lots on one side. So, but it was designed in that philosophy we're talking about.
Thank you.
So this was one. Next, please. Moving slightly to the southwest on the West Plains, another area that is transitioning. And when the 2001 plan was done, the West Plains was really planned for industrial growth for whatever reason, and it's transitioned over time. And part of that transition is the cities maybe not having enough land to build what people wanted to build, and so subdivision moved in this direction. Also, from 2005 to 2007, the county code allowed single-family residential in the light industrial zone. Since there are some legacy plats out here, Aspen Park among them, that have started down that path and are still in a light industrial zone. We want to correct that just for their own benefit. If bad things happen to your house and you're in the wrong zone, it's not always a fatal flaw, but bankers look at it differently. Title companies look at it differently. It's like, well, you put up more hurdles if your zoning mismatches they use. So part of it is a map correction, but because there are these disparate subdivisions out here, this is where we see the neighborhood residential 2 coming into play, interject some small shops. We all know there's no grocery store, there's no market, there's nothing out here except now a brand new county park. Very cool. A little bit further south. This is a thing that if it's planned and you start to say, well, if in the next 5 years we're really going to add another 1,000 units out here, are we hitting a market point where we can put in a small market or put in a satellite market of some kind that can grow over time? And then last one, please. This is the southern end of the existing West Plains. And there, the green dot right at the bottom of the slide is the new park. This is the Medical Lake interchange. A lot of this is going to stay commercial and traditional light industrial. Those are sweet spots around interchanges, which is why it's the middle slide that's the one that has the most flexibility for moving around, because businesses, they don't want to be driving down local streets with tractor trailers all day long. They'd rather stay by the intersections where they've got big lots. But this is also that one that's going to be heavily influenced by critical areas, because now we know, things like stormwater management that we didn't know before. So this could be another neighborhood residential too. It could be a combination of neighborhood business on the edges that are closest to the business, which we've had interest in our shop from property owners. For example, next to the satellite company out there that are saying, why can't we put residential? Well, you can't because it's light industrial. Say, well, why? This is a quiet user. It's not a truck stop. It's not going to bother the residents. The residents aren't going to complain. But our rules at the time just don't allow it. This allows that to happen, where you could in fact walk to work again. And there were discussions about even with Amazon, as they were ramping up their second building, of running a shuttle, just running a small like a shuttle from the various businesses through this area on a periodic basis for employees to be able to get back and forth to the big businesses. So if you start to think about this in a master planned approach, a lot of this can come together in a really sustainable fashion over time, as opposed to just plopping in one subdivision after the next.
So I know this area, some of the roads are like more historically country roads.
Yes.
And as we have more development occurring, so obviously you have to look at that, the impact on what the cost would be to
Of course.
upgrade those facilities. So that, you guys are doing that in each of these study areas. You're
Correct.
looking at the transportation impacts or utilities.
We are in great detail, as well as, the next slide we're going to talk about, all of the potential growth areas for the UGA. We've already gotten our initial comments from our transportation folks. We've done the transportation modeling.
Right.
So we're doing that. And some of it's not very glamorous. It's lane capacity and it's sewer capacity. But we have to know that if we're going to plan for this growth. Next, please. And this is, again, a very large, this is just the metro core. But it shows some of the UGA modification possibilities, and those are centered on the green parcels of the green dots that you see scattered around the edges of the metro core. And then around each of those target areas is a study area that is roughly a half-mile radius. And there's nothing fixed about that. It's just to say, if these parcels, as they start to be evaluated in more detail, show promise, we want to look at adjacent parcels to do a little bit what you were alluding to leverage any infrastructure improvements that have to be made. Let's get more value for that out of a single pipe, for example. And so these are the ones that are going to be narrowed down from their 14 or 18 or so down to maybe 3 or 4 good candidates for affordable growth and development. And you can sort of see as well, there are some red parcels, notably around at Medical Lake and up in Airway Heights. These are city requested UGA modifications that the county is supporting, and we're doing it with a caveat, which is that there needs to be an annexation agreement with these that is to be executed in some short period of time after the UGA, after the comprehensive plan is adopted, which then takes them out of the county's portfolio, puts the responsibility back on the city that wants them. And really, from our perspective, is probably the way of the future of doing urban growth area modifications, is tying them into a true annexation strategy. So this is, we think it's fairly, it seems common sense, but we think it's fairly innovative to link those two directly, because They're not linked in GMA, they're not linked anywhere else in the statutes. So it'll be literally an interlocal agreement between county and the cities. Next, please. Then the last couple of issues, again, key takeaways again. We're insufficient at meeting the needs from our capacities in the 0 to 80% AMI bands. And remember, the 0 to 30 to 50 bands are those that are almost unable to provide affordable housing outside of multifamily, out of a rental. But in the 50 to 80 and even the 80 to 100 AMI, there are builders, we've heard from several of them that say, given the right rules, there is a possibility of creating an ownership product at that 50 to 80% AMI level. So showing that we're still short of the 50 to 80, it provides us an opportunity through our development regs to try to create something where you can plan for and implement a potential ownership situation instead of being confined to a rental. So increasing the density beyond what we've proposed in alt 1 would be outside of the bookends. And then the same would be true if we were to say we don't want to change the densities at all, we simply want to expand based on our historical patterns. We calculated that would take almost 1,500 acres of additional land outside of our current UGAs, and that's equally unacceptable. It's outside of our bookend. So the looking at this then is gives us a chance to handle that 0 to 80 band with about 600 or so acres of new land made available to the urban growth area. And we'll put that in detail. We think we're seeing support for that coming through on comments. And then that will be something that the Planning Commission will talk through, and we'll produce that back for you as a UGA strategy. We hope to have that at least fleshed out for your discussion when we meet next, which we've scheduled in just 2 weeks for July 20th. So there's a lot to pull together from the time we get our comments on the DEIS. And next, please.
Sorry, can you just
Oh.
remind us
Yes.
alternative 1 versus alternative 2?
Alternative 1 is accommodating our entire growth allocation within the existing municipal and UGA boundaries by changing only the density
Got it,
requirements.
okay.
Alternative 2 says, do some of that, but reflect what the market wants to build, which is still that 4.5 units an acre. And that's going to take land outside of we'll use up what we have in the UGA and we'll need land outside. If we only did that, it would be as much as 1,300 to 1,500 acres of new land. If you combine those two, some infill to accommodate these lower income bands for the most part, and some historic market sensitivities, we think we're at about a 600 acre expansion of the UGA.
So why, and I'm just trying to follow, so alternative 1 is basically keeping the same UGA and just putting a lot more density in it,
Correct.
right? So why does that not, I'm just trying to understand the first bullet. That doesn't help you meet your 0 to 80% AMI. I'm just trying to, I don't understand why that, I mean, you have more units that you're building at different. For different
Chiefly,
income levels.
Chiefly, it is a reflection of the Mercer Island case. To fit everything for all of these in that same area would be to concentrate those 0 to 80 AMI bands in limited areas. And that was one of the sort of fundamental problems with Mercer Island, is they said, we're going to put all of these 0 to 80s in our town center where our transit station is. And they were faulted for concentrating that and not taking into account the impact of that. So that's a big reason for it.
So that's where the alternative 2, where you have these neighborhood zoning that are sprinkled throughout the county, would allow for those types of units to be built in a variety of places. Is that what you're getting at?
Philosophically, yes. It's still going to be very, very hard to build the 0 to 30
Yeah.
AMI in any of these suburban locations. We're going to have to try to focus that. looking ahead, that's one of the areas that we need to talk with the city of Spokane about and say, you've got the facilities to do this, you've got you've got the transit, you've got things downtown. Let's figure out a better way for us to support some of this that we simply can't support effectively out on the edge. And the chief factor of that is the price of land, which immediately structures the affordability of the structure, whether it's multifamily or not. And it's the price of a car. If you can't get to where you're going without a car, your affordability in a 0 to 30 or even 30 to 50 AMI is almost impossible. So you need to have, and then from planning purposes, we have to show that we have made every accommodation to put these in areas that can make that affordability.
Because currently we don't have any PSH, permanently supportive housing models in the unincorporated areas, or do we
No.
have? Okay, and that's usually what supports the 0 to 30 or 50.
That's correct.
So there's a way to kind of negotiate with other cities to take some of that growth.
Well, right now, no.
Okay.
Because we're not part of a buildable lands program,
Okay.
and we're allocating growth strictly using the commerce model that was handed to us in 24. What we want to do is be able to modify our growth patterns. We want to talk about it in this next 5 years with all of the steering committee members and say, let's look at this as a region the way we really should be, and where does it make the most sense? Without making an undue burden on the core city, for example, and say, well, you should take everything, up to 80% and we'll take everything out plus 120. Now that's ethically unfair, but at the same point, where are the services that people need if they're especially in the PSH or non-PSH, permanent or supportive housing? It makes no sense to put them out on the West Plains, unless you characterize that as workforce housing, and now you're in the 30 to 50, 50 to 80% AMI, but you don't need a car because there's a shuttle or there's a transit service out there.
I mean, in a way, we're already collaborating on funding, co-funding PSH units, with our funds, city's funds, and also shelters. Like, we're using our money in the county and the city, we're already collaborating to fund a lot of those very low income units, or with the housing authority or what have you.
And
But
we
this
are in
is
the
kind of
plan
different.
too.
This is more about where, but it's a good exercise to, I appreciate the exercise the state is putting us through, but at a certain point, you do want to accommodate people where they can be most successful,
It
right?
is, not to get kind of sidetracked on that, we've had a discussion that was didn't come to a conclusion. For example, George's shop or Justin's, if the county owns and operates a shelter or a structure of some kind, but it's in the city of Spokane, who gets to claim credit for that in our
Right,
plan?
that's kind of what I was getting at. We
And
are,
the city says, well, we do, because it's in the city. And it's like, well, no. We have this obligation to meet these criteria, and we need to be able to do that to make this happen, so.
Can you back up one slide? I just want to make sure I heard on the red dots. Those are requested by this, are those, describe those one more time. Those are requested by cities to be included in UGA.
Correct. Mostly swapped. Medical Lake, for example, has existing UGA that is rural on their north side between them and the Fairchild Runway, which is hardly a good place to build housing. They want to swap that over to their east side, where on their highway where they want to grow, and they're also very candid. They want to be able to create a path for water and sewer out to the lake to try to do some environmental protection of the lake and get the septic systems off of there. They need a UGA to make that happen. Fairway Heights is moving from the county ORV park, which is in a UGA and is never going to develop, moving some of that to where they think they can develop. And then Cheney has proposed a relatively small 10-acre extension on their north side. And
That's a tiny little red dot.
the very
that you
bottom
can
of the
just
map.
barely see.
Is there an opportunity for public comment today?
No, there's not during these meetings, sorry.
And we've talked with them, and Cheney in particular has expressed some concerns because the other part of this is the non-urban, none of these urban UGAs are non-urban. Some of them are in broken conservation lands, some of them are in scab lands. We will be right sizing this UGA, so they will be, in a sense, either shifted or they will be de-designated.
So are those the red boxes? They're not currently within a UGA,
That's correct.
they're within a city.
No, they're,
Oh, okay, they're on the edges. of
they're on the
it.
edges, and that's what we're saying. If we agree to do this, to make this swap for you, you
Yeah.
have to annex them at the earliest possible opportunity, because we're not gonna take care of it.
So do those red boxes then go through the same analysis that the green ones? Okay,
We're,
because it's a swap or what's the?
because it's a
difference?
swap. The UGA adjustment has two places in the RCWs.
Okay,
One is what we're doing here for the periodic updates. And the second is the swap. So for this one, we're using these as swaps, and we're gonna test that with Commerce. They've been a part of this. We're gonna test it with FutureWise. We're gonna say, here's what we're doing, very candidly, we're trying to move this around and provide some future growth. If that is not supported, chiefly by, FutureWise or Commerce, we'll come up with another solution. We're not gonna put forward something that we know is gonna take us out of compliance.
got it.
Makes sense. Still have to be approved by the commissioners.
I'm sorry?
The land swaps have to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners.
Correct. Yes, it all comes to you for approval because the board is the one responsible to adopt an urban growth area. Oh,
The ORV park, is that in the city of Every Heights?
no,
It's
Yes.
unincorporated county.
it's an unincorporated county and it has UGA designation.
Okay.
So that's 180 acres that it's never gonna develop, so it doesn't need the UGA designation.
Unless others are looking at that as a potential for swapping for their needs as well.
Yes. But the swaps can be requested by the communities, but they have to be approved by you.
Thank you for that clarification.
And Scott, can I ask, where are we as far as the green box? And where each of those was going to be evaluated on sort of their readiness or ability as infrastructure? I mean, many different things sort of on the checklist of if they met as a good candidate to be brought into a UGA. Where are we in that process? Do you have a list of sort of what is prime, what's not quite ready for prime time yet?
We are getting that list put together for you on the 20th.
Okay.
We're in the process of gathering comments on the DEIS now, and those comments are public comments to be sure, but also agency comments. So we'll be getting DOT comments based on the transportation modeling. We'll be getting ecology comments based on the critical areas. And so all of those will come together. And even though those are the parcels that met the 7 or 8 initial criteria, now we'll start to tighten those down into who meets them in more detail and who meets them better than others. And then that will provide some guidance for the Planning Commission and for you on a future urban growth area change.
Yeah. Thank you.
And as I said, just because there's one green parcel in the middle, we're considering those that are adjacent to it and around it as part of get to the idea of leveraging the infrastructure that might be needed to bring them in.
Okay, 'cause part of that's like some of the areas that are really sewer. Or facilities that are outside the UGA that are,
Yes, there's a separate issue that we're working on, mostly behind the scenes, because part of it is a very challenging situation we have with a plat, a cluster plat in the Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District boundary, but outside of the urban growth area. Liberty Lake Sewer and Water insists that it should be on their system. Since it's outside of an urban growth area, if these parcels hook up to that system, we will not issue them building permits because we would be issuing them an illegal permit for sewer outside of the UGA. So this group is caught between two sections of the RCW that don't align at all. We're discussing this. We're going to be going back to the hearing examiner on that, looking for more clarification. It is almost certainly going to end up through an appeal, and at some point we'll have a court decision that will probably tell us what we have to do. And then there'll be some guidance on that. in other areas, though, there are still areas, and we're talking with Medical Lake about this as well as the Southeast Metro. There are abilities to move sewer outside of an urban growth area, but they're very limited, and county only has 4 in our code, one of which is a failed septic system. That doesn't allow for a potentially failed system, it has to actually fail. But there are some environmental protection criteria in there that we're exploring and seeing if we have some flexibility in certain cases. Say, protecting Saltese Flats, where we might be able to say this has a critical environmental issue that doesn't require a UGA. Same with Medical Lake. For example, if the critical issue is taking septic off of a lake that improves that water quality all the way along, that may be something that would be allowed, because again, in Medical Lake, that sewer is not going to promote sprawl. It's going to serve a limited area that's only going to be here. And so that's been the argument historically about not using sewers outside of an urban growth area, because it fosters more expensive urban development that shouldn't be there. In these cases, we think there might be a legitimate argument to say this won't foster sprawl. It simply serves a true environmental, ecological need. So we're pursuing that as well. And Matt and his team are with us every step of the way here. I know we've gone over time. Everything we've talked about, ultimately, we're going to get back to you. We want to give you guidance on what we want you to create, which is going to be called a preferred alternative. We've already hinted at what we think that's going to look like. It'll be between these bookends, some part of infill with some part of historic growth patterns. And then once that is picked or decided and you give us that guidance, we will wrap up everything else and we'll get this thing done by mid-September.
So I've got some comments, and I just want to get your initial reaction, because I know there's more work to do, and you're gonna take all the comments that have come from the county over the
We'll
next.
address every comment.
So some of the comments have suggested having more flexibility in the NR1, I think,
Yes.
zoning. To allow for more types of smaller cottage housing, different types of housing to accommodate either home ownership or rental model.
We
Are
are
you
very
gonna consider
supportive.
some of those
Yep.
ideas?
very
Okay.
supportive of some of those ideas.
Okay, great, thank you.
We need a new zoning code that is totally different from the historical Euclidean zoning of Ohio 26. Sure, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yes, you've got lots of work going. Next it's gonna be Mr. Mike Sparber.
Try to get that back. We have Mr. Evans.
Perfect. You're good. Welcome to the table, Jim.
Okay, good morning. So, the last time we were in, we talked about the Central Public Facilities Siting Process Committee and the composition of it. And today you'll see in your packet on page 2, go to the bottom. Some of the things that we're talking about today is the composition of it. And then also included in your packet is the bylaws that will govern the committee as we move forward. So if you look at attachment 1.
Mike, could we have Rebecca pull that up on the overhead if she is
Yeah, I
able
think she
to?
is.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I would say one thing when you look at attachment 1. Attachment 1 to the resolution are the 10 members of the Essential Public Facilities Committee, which you've set up. I want to be sure the board is aware of those particular members and how they're designated. The county commissioners will be designating 2 of those. And we have that on next week's agenda, Madam Chair, because we didn't think you were ready today. And the 2 you'll be appointing are number 9, which is the real estate business representative. The board will appoint that individual to the EPF committee. And number 10, Madam Chair, is the architect or construction industry representative to be designated by the board. So next week, Madam Chair, I have two separate resolutions for one for each one, so the board can make their designation to that. And of course, we will want that designation to take place before we actually convene the Essential Public Facilities Committee. Mr. Sparber and I also felt it was appropriate for the Board of County Commissioners to adopt some simple bylaws so that the Essential Public Facilities Committee could move forward in a timely fashion. So the reason Mike and I are here is we prepared some simple bylaws, which are attachment to the resolution which you will be considering tomorrow at your 2 o'clock legislative agenda. These bylaws are very simple. They're the minimum numbers that you have to have. You'll notice in the bylaws that Mr. Sparber and I have identified that the committee is subject to the Open Public Meeting Act. And because of that, many of the particular provisions in the bylaws reference the OPMA and are consistent with it. It was Mr. Sparber and my hope that by the board adopting these bylaws, which is done and being able, that the EPF committee could timely meet and start moving forward with their responsibilities under the Essential Public Facility process. Questions?
Do you need a process by which a chair or vice chair is elected?
That is in the bylaws, that
It
is
is.
correct. Their first meeting, Mr. Sparber and I have already prepared an agenda. And after introducing themselves, they will be electing a chair and a vice chair
Okay,
to take charge of the meetings. Yeah,
just simple majority for it.
that is correct.
Okay. Got it.
Just a question, would we wanted to say it's the 2026 Essential Public Facilities Committee, so that way in the future. Clear what the year of establishment was.
We can certainly, Madam Chair, make that change. We're hoping to have.
We would
this
know
pro-
when it's established, because it under members, it says resolution number 26 dash, but
It's
Or-
like, as we've come back to in our different meetings, it's like the Public Facilities Committee in the past, we've had it, so it's just, I think in the title, you can which year, then. Yeah, even if it's just in brackets after the EPF. 2026, just, because that way then. I think we kind of kept asking, like, when was that, what year was that? You know, all of that, and so that way it just makes it clear, this is. This year's.
Madam Chair, you're suggesting in the caption of the resolution, excuse me, after the EPF in Prince, we put 2026. I think, is that what I'm hearing you say? So we can certainly do that. I don't think that's a material change that would require us to take this separately. I'm glad to do that and give the revised resolution to the clerk
Well, and because we're not voting on this for another week.
tomorrow.
Oh, we are voting.
It's on tomorrow's agenda, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yes, again, just setting up the committee and adopting the bylaws, yes.
We gotta help the people as well, okay. Yeah, I don't know, it seems like if we could keep that in the title, it'd just be easy as, you know, when this happens again in the future, then it just, everyone knows which year, because it was kind of. Like I still don't know the last time we did it, what year that was. Over 10 years ago.
We can certainly do that. Madam Chair, the reason why I think Mr. Sparber and I thought about that issue is we're assuming we're going to be through with the process in November of 2026, but we don't know because the committee is subject to the OPMA. And so, but again, we can certainly, we'll put that language in there,
And
Madam
that's probably
Chair.
the same.
Yeah.
At least we know that that's
Yeah.
when this was started. And if we have to do it again in 5 years.
Yeah.
we kind of- That. great.
Madam Chair, I'll make that change. I don't see any disagreement by the other board members, and I'll give the revised resolution to the clerk with only that change in it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
So this, the bylaws and the list of members we voted on tomorrow. And then you're saying following week, we would have resolutions to designate our representatives on tonight and, okay, all right.
And Madam Chair, in both resolutions, Commissioner Jordan, I left the name of the person
Yeah.
blank.
Okay,
So, Madam Chair, I think they're gonna have to make the motion actually at the meeting. I don't know how else to do that. Unless there's several names and I can put all the names in there and then you vote for one. But I'm not
We
sure.
were Voting on the names for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but,
We may be able to,
oh yeah, you want a
Identify
couple of
who that
weeks?
is.
Madam Chair, that would be fine. It's set whenever you want to place it on the agenda.
I guess I'm confused because I thought you said it's like something was gonna be on in a couple of weeks, so I'm.
The two names of the
The two names.
individuals you have to,
Okay,
yeah.
so we have
was what you're planning
Right.
next week.
next week,
Okay.
okay.
So one suggestion, I think on number 9, I was tasked to reach out to DSP.
Yeah.
I need to check if Chrissy did that last week, but if she didn't, I'll get on that today. I can provide that name to Mike. Mike could circulate it to the board. It could be plugged in to the agenda. We could talk about it in briefing next week, and if there was some question, it could be delayed from there. Does that work?
I think that works fine, particularly if we talk about it next week,
Yeah.
Commissioner Jordan.
In the morning, we could check in with everybody, make sure it's agreeable.
And then on the other one, like, I'm not sure who our architects are that we have on. Kind of on call.
Yeah, or owner's rep. Which is representative on the path project, which, you know, we could incorporate. The other one is Graham, just looking at the overall project. path process.
But I think, Madam Chair, you're correct. I think we have a short list of architects that we can call that have gone through the selection process. I believe that's what you're referring to, Madam Chair.
Honestly, the owner's rep would probably be a good one because they understand the architectural.
That's
and
kind of how I
construction
viewed
side of
it too, the owner's rep.
So I'm, who is that?
Nate Razzle, yeah,
Which company?
he's with Turner Townsend.
If-
And he's done a fantastic job up to this point.
If he'd be willing to do it again, it's on a volunteer basis.
I'll check with them. You know, the capacity.
You guys, okay. I think it just gives us, again, someone, because one of the people is in our facilities committee, right?
Yes.
Already.
Yes.
But it just, again, as I said last time, I think having someone who's kind of thinking of it beyond the county, internal functions of the county, is to that ownership would be great. That's what they do.
I'll certainly check with him to see if he has capacity. Also, not here, but you'll see on your lead session tomorrow is the final document for the use and operation agreement for the existing center, the stabilization center, with the changes that are gonna be in operation during construction. So you'll see that tomorrow. if you have it.
Nothing, Madam Chair, that we've talked about, read that with the board before. Remember, we had the stabilization agreement with Pioneer. And now that we're building the new crisis relief and sobering, we had to modify their use of that facility. And so we have finally arrived at that. There were some issues with regard to the parking, which we had to address. That's why it's being put on the agenda for tomorrow.
Plus, it's also just trying to make sure that that the entire
Yes,
system is working.
Yes.
so it modified the way,
Different
yeah,
agreements.
first
with each
responders
other.
come into the building and modify a list of things that are listed out in there.
Okay,
Along with diagrams.
So maybe we could just put like a 5-minute item on next Tuesday morning agenda to talk about number 9, and I'll provide that date out ahead of time. ESP.
And I'll
That
try to
sounds
get,
good.
yeah, and I'll try to get some feedback on that with him by then.
great.
And
I guess that.
they could get back on track. Thanks, Tim, for your help. I appreciate it.
Good job.
Tessa and Heather are coming.
Alright.
And Mr. Macio might be a part of this too, item 1590. So we were requested to provide a revenue option and kind of which different levers you can pull and what is authorized with each one, what amount of funding would come in, and this is in relation to the Safe and Healthy Task Force. You, what Tessa's handing out, you all have electronically in your inboxes also. We finished it up this morning, so we'll be early. Mr. Macy, I think worked over the weekend. But, I think we have all the pieces here. So the first is just gonna be kind of an overview, the slide we had recently in budget. You'll see in the top left-hand corner where it totals up to 85.8 million. Those are the county's current sales taxes today. So we get our large chunk of 51 million, and then we have the voter or councilmatic approved that brings in a tenth for the jails. Criminal justice we get a part of, and then the public safety for the county and cities, you're aware of the splits and how those work. Below that, we also have the emergency communications and the mental health. When we get the full 1%, when there's no carve out, sometimes automobiles have been carved out or other things. When we get the full 1/10, it is about 17.2 million in current dollars. If you go over to the right, we've talked about the new-ish, it came up about a year ago in the legislature, allowing the local law enforcement 1/10. The application is in, been for a couple of weeks. We haven't heard anything back yet, have we? But we work with the sheriff's office to fill out all the appropriate paperwork and get that submitted. It would be 17.2 plus an inflationary factor going into 28. Just to remind you, the way we're allowed to implement these, we can't implement it until January 1st. And then there's a 2-month delay. So we wouldn't collect the January money until April. So that's why it'd be 14.3 in 27. We would only be collecting 10 months, not the full 12-month year. It would go up to 17.2 plus whatever the economy is doing in the following year. The additional 2/10, there's the 3/10 that can be used for public safety. 1/10 was taken by the county years ago. Both the city of Spokane and the city of Spokane Valley took an additional 1/10 within the last year or two. You all know that when the city goes first, we get 15%, they get 85%. The county goes first, we keep 60, distribute 40% based on population. We would get 13.3. We have another sheet coming up that would show what the cities would receive. And then there's also the housing and related services 1/10, often called 1590. Ms. Dickerhoof often testifies on this one, just to give you the, I think I will call it there is awareness. That one, the city has already taken it, the city of Spokane. They are roughly 47%. So we estimate we would get 9.2 if we took it. The other 8 million would stay with the city of Spokane since they took it. Back in the day, the counties could have taken it first countywide, but after a certain date, if the cities take it, then they keep their share. So that's kind of an overview. And then as we move down, the next sheet, if you look at the bottom on the right-hand side, this is that additional 2/10 of public safety. You'll see on the bottom right under the gray, it says county. That's the 13.3 we would get. The city of Spokane would receive about 5.2 million. Spokane Valley about 2.4, and then the other small cities collectively about 1.2. And that's when we do all the math, and we collect it all, And then you have the two cities with the 85-15 split, all the rest of the 60-40 split. When you do all that math, so you will see it is 17.3. But the cities go up and then we go up. So that's, if you then look at safe and healthy, if the cities were willing to contribute some of that, that gives you the bookend there.
And this is voter approved. This would have to be voter.
This would have to be voter approved. This would be the remaining of that 0.3 public safety sales tax.
So Jeff, I'm always confused. So we already took one of the 0.3.
Correct.
So where does that show up here?
That's the 9.4.
Because the 40% gets distributed to the counties or to
Okay,
the cities.
I think we do that. When it expires in
Is that a
2029.
10-year? Or the first time?
It was not the first time. That one has been in, let me look for just a moment here.
It was renewed, I think around 2019-ish, right? Because it was in place. I know when I was first elected, it was there. And then we did a renewal in my time of being here.
We just did the renewal on them. The 911,
We've done that too.
We did the juvenile recently too.
well, to the juvenile. Okay,
The juvenile was a 20-year, that wasn't.
And that was only like last year, right?
Very recently.
Yeah.
find out on that one.
Also spoken about.
Okay,
So following up on that, why again, if that's public safety county 9.4, why is it only 9.4?
Because that's the 60%. So this charge is just the portion that
Oh.
we eat
Oh, out of
Count
17.
out of 17, the remaining
40%.
7.8 will be
Okay.
distributed to the cities. based
That
on the
makes sense.
population.
Thank you.
So the public safety was first approved by the voters, 2005, so the ballot initiative must have been in 2004. And it went 05 to 9. And then we've done 10-year chunks after that.
That expires 2029.
Correct. And would need a vote to be maintained.
The next sheet is what Mr. Maceo put together for everyone. And this is what we call the 1590. So it's a housing, often gets referenced as affordable housing. However, it can also be used for behavioral health related facilities. This one can be voter approved or councilmatic. So it can go either way. There has been some updates to the legislation as recently as this year. So if you go under number 4, you see the uses. So it can be used for affordable housing facilities. So it's more your capital side. It can also be used for behavioral health related facilities or acquiring the property for them. You can use it for O&M of new units of affordable housing and facilities, not supplanting. You can also use it to rehabilitate affordable housing, which can include emergency transitional supportive housing.
So at number 3. Can you, says, so you can operate and maintain new units of affordable housing. But then if you keep reading, it says, or newly constructed evaluation and treatment centers. Is that a specific thing? Or is that just generally behavioral health treatment?
Commissioner, unfortunately, the bill did not have any definition sections involved in it, so I'm here with Justin Johnson. Justin may be able to comment on that issue better than anyone else.
Like, would our crisis center be an evaluation and treatment?
An ENT is a distinct type of facility under the statute, either voluntary or involuntary, and our current facility does not have remote care.
So what would be an example of that?
FPH's Foothills in Kalispell, there's freestanding in hospital, Up in Colville, there's a Alliance facility as part of the hospital in Providence. And then the other ones are in like Wenatchee and down south of Tri-Cities. So the new facility down in Tri-Cities has an ENT component at their Columbia Valley Center. It's a little bit more robust and requires nursing and medical component built in. So the cost is significantly higher because there's also management of like secure areas as well as seclusion restraint.
Is an sorry, what's your acronym for that?
E&T.
ENT.
Yeah.
Is that something that's been contemplated with the Safe and Healthy Task Force as a need for the Spokane area?
That has been discussed. It's one of the things that I know the city is interested in pursuing because of the involuntary component. The challenge with that facility though, as a freestanding, there are challenges managing comorbidities. They still cannot do complex medical, and the cost of which would be twice as much as the current facility. And there have been some questions on whether or not that facility is needed in our region. The Wenatchee one closed. There have been census issues with our existing one. That level of care is more acute, but they need to maintain 80% to remain sustainable. They can't. So Inland Northwest, which is a freestanding hospital that has a higher acute psychiatric hospital, which is a little bit higher than the ENT itself, has been challenged with maintaining census. So the question really is, can we, and any provider who manages that, remain sustainable? And I just have questions on that. That's why we proceeded to different route.
Got it. Thank you.
So you,
Now, on that, I wonder if that's part of the way that the uses of the funds seems to be structured. It's like 60% are really geared toward capital, right? And 40% is for operational or delivery, with the one exception apparently being
you
ENT.
capital.
You can operate an ENT with the 60%, probably for that reason, right? That they're hard to keep open.
Okay, but if you go to the next page, 40% can be used for
General.
general
operation.
behavioral health treatment, and our crisis center or other places would qualify for that.
Correct.
Okay.
I think, Madam Chair, also on the chart, a critical item is number 7 on page 2 of 2, which allows the money to supplant 10% of our present costs that we have. But you'll see the offset too. If we're presently getting any state or federal dollars which are reduced, then this particular 1/10 of 1% could be used to replace those dollars.
You know, goes into number 5, we can use up to 50% for bonds. Where I talked to the 60-40 split on operation services and the caveats there. Some.
And Mr. McMorris, my understanding is, Madam Chair, that if, for instance, the city of the Valley or another city opted to impose this particular tax councilmatically, then their share would be subtracted from what the county gets. Jeff, that's my understanding. In the same fashion that the city of Spokane, which is also passed the tax. And I included in the handout, the city's tax, when they imposed it councilmatically, the first thing they could runs for a 20-year time frame, at least, and it's presently draft. And I think it's on the chart. I think you'll see that, and it was helpful. The other factor that I thought was critical on page 2, the asterisk. If you build a new facility, remember, it has to be available for people of a certain income bracket. And that is, they have to have 60% of the median income in Spokane County. And Commissioner Kearns, when I looked that up, at least for the Department of Commerce, you'll see on the second page, they said the median income that they reported was 77,174. Now, that may have gone up recently, but I think that is a critical element when you are talking about capital expenditures with this funding resource. And please correct me, Mr. Morris, if I have misstated something.
You know this better than the rest of us.
Well, I think Commissioner Jordan is also very familiar with it.
Oh, thanks. So just to clarify, so that 60% median income is for the affordable housing facilities, not necessarily behavioral health.
Well, Commissioner Jordan, I have to say, I'd have to look at the 4 items under number 4 and the comment period to see if behavioral health possibly falls within one of those categories. And I'm looking at Mr. Johnson to see if he has a comment on that.
Not off the top of my head, I'd have to unmute as well.
Just something to look at, that if there
Yeah.
was a treatment center built. Or if some of the dollars were used or could be used, like to help operate that as an example. I don't see an income restriction on behavioral health programs in here, but that's just, it seems to only apply to the affordable housing, but if you find something different, please let us know.
We'll look at that, Commissioner Jordan.
Thank you.
And just to remind, this one, if enacted, would be roughly 9.2 million for the county. The remaining 8 million would go to the city since they have already.
But now, did I understand correctly? So hypothetically, I mean, so yeah, city already has this in place. If we were to have this in place, it's the 9.2 or to be said. But say the valley put it in place, then our 9.2 drops.
So the valley can
And
do
if
it after.
Liberty
us?
Lake throws it in, ours drives. Any city that comes out, our number continues to go down.
That is correct.
Wow.
Well, that's the way the
That's
legislature.
wildly unreliable. I mean, especially like if you were to bond something out with those dollars, depending on those dollars to be there.
Well,
those
wouldn't all the
dollars could
cities take them
disappear.
then, because their people are getting taxed either
Yeah.
way, they might as well keep the dollars at home.
Yeah, you
I mean,
would
if I
think,
was
yeah,
in the city, that's what I would do.
yeah.
The legislation was
Wow.
amended most recently to encourage cities and counties via ILAs to put their money together and to facilitate the issuance of bonds or moving forward with the capital element or the O&M element.
Wow, good question. Jeez. So on that, my understanding was it's kind of a race to enact it. So if
That's what I'm
the city won the race, right? They've already done that. If we were to do it in theory, then the other cities wouldn't be able to. Is that true or not?
I don't believe that's correct,
Okay.
Commissioner Jordan. The county had the sole authority before a certain time frame. After that time frame, the cities all have the ability to do it. The city of Spokane is the only city so far that's done it. If the cities do it, it reduces, as Commissioner Kearns has indicated, our proportionate share. And yes, it would be very problematic to issue bonds based upon a stream that was problematic.
That's
But that
probably
was-
gonna shrink, you
yeah.
know, a stream of revenue that's gonna shrink. Cause yeah, like Jeff just said, if we were to implement it, it would tax everybody outside of the city of Spokane. So any other city could then implement this, not be raising any taxes, cause they're already, all they're doing is they just be voting to siphon off the amount of money that their taxpayers are paying to then go to their city rather than to the county.
I'm more
Wow.
than happy to touch
That
base,
is-
Madam Chair, with your bond council, but.
I wonder
would
if
assume
Becky,
that
I
you
wonder if
would
Becky knows
recommend
this.
That if you did issue bonds, it would be for the worst case situation. That's if all the larger cities imposed the similar tax, and then what's left, if you will, Commissioner Kearns, is what we would issue bonds for based upon that revenue stream, if there were gonna be revenue bonds in lieu of GO bonds, Madam Chair. So depends how you'd structure those. I assume they'd be GO bonds because we get a better bond rate on those, but that's a bond council issue.
Yeah, but you know, as we're seeing with the public facilities districts, you know. Gotta make sure, I mean, there's no ironclad way to know that the council's going to not change their mind. Yeah. Did you say the legislation changed recently, Jim?
Change in 26.
Okay, so I wonder if in 26 that's what made it where the cities Cause I thought it was the same way where it was, once we enacted it, then the other cities couldn't. But maybe that's the change that was made, was to allow the cities to go after it.
Well, Madam Chair, you're correct. Had the county have opted to impose the tax countywide before that date certain, then the cities would have been precluded from doing it. And but the board didn't do that, so then the cities can opt to move forward with their imposition of the councilmatic tax.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the 1590, as we call it? And from there, we'll
Quick
move.
question, one more. So on that tax, if in theory the county tax, the county would receive 100% of those $8, at least for till a city later chose to enact, so there's no like 80-20 split or anything like that.
That is correct. There's no 80-20 split and the cities are subject to the same provisions that we are. That is to say, they can only enact the tax on a quarterly basis, except the last quarter. And they too have to give 75 days notice to the Department of Revenue to administer the tax for them.
Is there any reason why? If the county in theory enacted that, could we by ILA agree with some of those other cities to share those revenues in certain ways, like similar to the public safety 110?
From a legal perspective, there's no provision which precludes counties and cities via ILA from sharing revenues. It doesn't violate the constitutional provisions whatsoever.
Thanks.
We added in rental assistance in 26. May encourage ILAs with the cities, the whole section on that. One bill, so. Read it more. We go with that one. The next one we'll look at is the mental health sales tax. I'll let us not up to that one and Justin can chime in as it's.
Just I may have you come up and like, if Jim, I think they can see, but I think you're.
Perfect. So consistent with the rest of the 1/10 of 1% sales taxes that we've estimated for 2027. We've estimated $17.2 million of revenue for 2027. Couple caveats, these are very, very, very preliminary expense estimates. Very, very, very preliminary. We took 26's budget and added our typical 7% increase that we're going with salaries. We know benefits are increasing more, so most of the programs under our expenditures do fund county staff until we get down to Justin's group. So we have detention services programming, that's about $2 million estimated for 2027. The district court mental health therapeutic court is made up of district court staff, public defense time, prosecution time. There's also an interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane to encourage participation in the regional district court mental health court. That's about $1.5 million. We've got the Superior Court Therapeutic Court. That is a court coordinator as well as some programming, I believe, through Pioneer Human Services. Some public defender time and prosecutor time to encourage participation in the therapeutic court. We have a pre-trial services mental health professional that is funded by mental health sales tax. We have a juvenile services mental health counselor that is funded. Juvenile services was given $145,000 for a domestic violence pilot program. I believe they will be looking for time to come and provide an update on that in the coming months. That is not currently listed for ongoing funding until the board makes a determination on the success of the pilot. Have the sheriff's mental health professional services contract. And then we have the Involuntary Treatment Act, or ITA court. That is run through Justin's team, but it is predominantly made up of staff time at the county, Superior Court, Court Commissioner, or commissioners maybe now at this point, and staff, public defense staff, prosecution staff, and clerk Superior Court time as well. So we're estimating about $3.1 million for that programming in 2027. And then we've got the ASO community services programming that we've estimated about 8.8. There's a lot of moving parts, I think, in that, as we all are well aware. So when we total everything up, we spend about $16.8 million of our 17.2 on an ongoing basis nowadays. So our expenses have started to catch up with our reoccurring revenue. And we'll need to start to closely monitor this fund and reoccurring operational costs.
And so all of these things affect cities, all the cities of the county, everyone. So it is, I will say, pretty well distributed amongst all the citizens.
Yep.
In the use. And I think sometimes people think just because we're paying, like, as the county, it's only the county, but it's like people from the city of the Valley or the city of Spokane are the ones that are in these situations, so that are benefiting from these dollars. So
Very well said.
I just wanted to state that for the record.
Can we get an updated list of the CST programs that are funded?
I just put one summary line,
Oh, yeah.
as
Well,
we had some
I think we
moving
need a
parts,
list
we-
at some point.
and we will be bringing that back as part of the 2027 budget process. We just didn't have enough time for the team to fully vet. We didn't, Laura's got grant season changing over with the June to July state grant, so we didn't want to overwhelm the
Yes.
team.
It'd be, I'm just saying, it'd be good to see a list as soon as, once that gets created.
Can I ask about the ITA court? That, is that considered one docket in Superior Court, or?
No, not one docket, but it is the totality of all ITA cases that occur within Spokane County.
Okay, so that they're not all funneled in front of the same judge with the, or that's not how that operates?
They have a set of commissioners that oversee that, and there are
Oh.
traveling courts as well that go to the facilities, Providence as well. So
Okay.
I think it's split
Okay.
time and they do proportionality as to how that docket looks on a given basis. I think there's a rotating set of judges.
Okay,
Yeah.
cause when I saw the 967 just for Superior Court, it's like, yeah, that's gotta. That's certainly more than one judge is what I was, and then when I saw for clerk at 373, that's probably like 4 clerks, a lot, so I wasn't sure, the numbers seem large, but if it's.
It was
If it's
set up
done, that's
originally
okay.
as, I believe, 4 functional courts.
Okay, okay,
But there are different days when the hearings are held.
And every time a new facility comes open where that evaluation occurs, they have to set it up there as well. So
Okay.
with Inland Northwest and Providence, all of those get set aside. Just the added cost anytime we open up a secure facility, courts and all the other administrative responsibilities follow.
okay, so it's not set up like a specialty court, like a veterans court or a drug court or something like that, or an individual docket where it all goes to one judicial officer and, okay. Okay,
Like inland here at Hop, when I toured there, and there's a separate little tiny room that is the courtroom for it.
okay, all right,
Not, I shouldn't say little tiny, but it's
I,
a small room that they have to have a courtroom in each of these facilities for these purposes.
okay.
I didn't realize we were paying for all
so
that.
we are paying for the proportional amount that is spent on that. There, we cover the cost of the court evaluators through state funds. And then for anyone that originates outside of our regions, the residents can be verified. We actually backbill those regions for those costs. So we recoup those. They also recoup costs for our residents in their region as well. So their costs will be a little bit higher. Obviously, to run a case in King County would be a little bit higher than our region. They pay our set costs per case rate, and we do vice versa in their region. So that's how those are.
Approximately how many people go through the ITA court in a calendar year?
I apologize, I don't have that numbers on hand. I know it is relatively high. We have a higher ITA docket than some of the other Eastern region.
It'd just be interesting for $3 million. How many people are we? Evaluating, going through the system. So is it something that other counties that have mental health sales tax, is that a common use of the sales tax?
It's one of
For the
the,
ITA docket?
it is one of the approved uses for mental health sales tax in statute. So in regions where they have it available, they do offset some of it. You look in counties like Pierce County where they run that stuff themselves. Instead of having an ASO, then there is an ability to shift that. We do receive some money from the administrative office of the courts. And so there's about $500,000 offset that we immediately apply to the courts that the state provides, but the state doesn't fully cover all of that. The state has allowed for flexible GSF that we are provided through the ASO to offset additional costs if that comes up. But here's the challenge to that. If we shift those to cover it, then make mental sales tax available, that reduces other services elsewhere that GSF could be used for, that we could use mental sales tax. Mental sales tax can only be used for Spokane County residents. GSF can be used for the entire region. So and this one of the decisions the board made to cover ITA with mental sales tax, it allowed for more money to be spent in like inpatient hospitals for any resident and for Spokane County residents outside of the region. It allowed us to expand down other mobile crisis response teams that the mental sales tax could not be used for at the time. So that was the shift. Now, if the board chose to shift away from that, that's always a possibility. That would mean a reduction in other services elsewhere. So it's always kind of if you take from Peter, hey Paul, how are you going to?
The GSF, is that a federal pass through?
No, that's the state general fund. Yeah, that's the flexible dollars the state makes available for all of the other stuff that is set as a either directed must pay. So it's
Which we don't know how those dollars will be established in the next year.
which is one of the things when we put forward the clawback at $10 million. The only reason we're able to pay that and then be in a better position now is because we were using mental sales tax. If we weren't, that would have meant immediate reduction. Otherwise, we would have put other things in jeopardy. So by doing that, we protected those services for like disruptions in that case. I don't anticipate we'll see that here in the next year, and our reserve was increased. So we have a little bit more capacity to absorb changes than we had previously, but then going into the next economic cycle, it puts added pressure as we look towards our ITA courts have had no disruption because of the use of mental sales tax. That's the kind of the give and take if you shift to use state funds.
So with the Medicaid waiver in the jail. And I know we're in the process of implementing that. To be able to charge Medicaid for mental health services. What's the status on that, and like, how much would it reduce our use of mental health sales tax?
I would defer to Mike on the status.
That was coming.
I think July 1st was.
Yeah, Eric Green scheduled, what day is it? Keep it updated.
Next week.
Huh?
Next week.
Next week.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get an update on that.
So we're in cohort 3 and we're operating. So he'll be able to give you an update on that next week.
But in terms of
Long
financial,
operation, yeah.
I guess my question is, once it becomes implemented fully, what kind of financial impact would that have? Okay, so that's also.
Well, so there's two parts to the jail reentry as part of 1115. It increased and allowed for providers in the community to bill all individuals investing in these services. That part the county doesn't receive. So that may allow for expanded engagement. We wouldn't receive that. So what we're really talking about is what would the jail and or the contracted medical provider be able to bill? And you're talking about a very limited set of services within 90 days of reentry and only reentry services. So you're only offsetting, and part of that's enhancement that would not be currently doing. So really, you wouldn't see a cost savings there because we're expanding service delivery, right? And just covering what that cost would be what we would already be providing as part of reentry. And that part's the unknown because you're taking only Medicaid individuals, which comprise, I think, 70% of the population, only those that would be eligible for reentry. Not subject to community-based
Which
services.
is why we truly, when we were going after it at the federal level, that we wanted to be problematic. For some reason, our state only applied to this time, which it's like.
So most of the costs, I mean, there's a lot more costs with the medical.
Yes, on the medical side, and you need to have medical and be healthy to then be able to help your mental health. So it was interesting, the decision that the state chose to make.
But what about our mental health staff at the county?
So it would allow for certain services if they provided it to be billed. That would also require that the jail itself contract with those managed care organizations to build those services. And so that would be separate. And then, of course, Medco would then have contracts with those managed care. So is it possible? Yes, but it would have to be, again, are there services that are currently provided that could be billable as part of reentry that could be offset? I think that's the challenge. I don't know. And I would say a lot of the services they do overall may not qualify because they're doing, risk assessments management. Not all of it is reentry.
Maybe a couple $100,000 a year.
Yeah, I see what you're shooting for, a ballpark figure.
Well, are we talking about 500,000 or are we talking about nothing? I mean, what?
More than 5,000,
I'm hoping
less
that
than
all
a
this
million,
kind of
I don't know.
Okay.
This is where it's really a ballpark. I can't imagine initially there would be a significant offset because they're starting and ramping this up.
Right, because we're actually providing more services. You're able to provide more services as people re-enter the community, okay. Which we're not currently able to provide. Or we're not doing it maybe as effectively as we would like to.
Yes, and some of it was very strictly called out in that reentry where we weren't, and it wasn't a requirement until now. Okay, part of it was new. I think you're gonna see more cost savings really on some of the components that Medco provides that they would be able to offset. That's really where you're gonna see the savings, and that won't gear up until they're able to produce services.
That's primarily what.
So once that occurs, does that, under the current Medco contract, do those savings kind of accrue to the county? Does that make sense?
I believe that was the intent of the contract.
I think I said that, I'll double. I think it goes with the full money.
So all of the services that could be billed under that waiver have to be considered within some definition of reentry.
Yeah, they're very clear when the state find those services, what HCPCS or CPT codes can be billed. And those are tied to the reentry. There are certain medical components that were added in there, imaging and whatnot. But that again was very strictly tied to services that we're looking to transition. Biggest ones are going to be the case management, pharmacology, so a lot of the medication, some of the med management, which weren't initially in there, and then you're looking at some of the nursing as well that is strictly tied to those areas. The jail also provides quite a bit of ongoing management of behavioral services. Those wouldn't qualify if it wasn't a part of the 90-day reentry.
And it's a 90-day, does that trigger from like 90 days within the time the service is provided or 90 days upon release? Where does the 90 days begin?
We argued this with the state back and forth, so their definition is really expanded, but it's within 90 days of the anticipated release of the individual, which could occur at the time that they enter, right? If the turnaround time, but once they initiate it, you have those 90-day period. If it's known that the individual is going to stay longer, then you have to terminate that and then reinitiate that. Yeah.
Great.
Nick, Mr. Walker, I just got that, it's 2 weeks from now, it's not next.
Okay. Thank you.
All this.
Can I ask one last question about the administrative side
Yeah.
of the use of the tax? So the 8.8 million, I know you guys said there's still some work to break that out into different parts of what's being funded for different programs. But what is the total amount of your administrative services, kind of. That's not your entire cost of doing business.
No, this is
Cause
just,
you're billing to every grant, you're billing overhead to every grant that we get, right? To cover the cost of the employees in your shop.
so, yeah, so this is the interesting part. We get a state grant from Healthcare Authority, then we have Department of Commerce. Then we have DSHS, Office of Forensic Medicine, so we have a bunch of different contracts there, plus the local dollars. All administrative capacity that we provide for oversight of the ASO, for the mental sales tax, we actually bill administratively to the state. So we're not actually incurring a significant component. Mostly my time is billed towards this. The board did approve for administrative costs to be assigned. Again, for the ASO's time specifically, there is a cost allocation that we use to support the work that we do under this. That goes back to the county for everything that is CSD incurred as part of it. That just gets reverted back to the county, but other than that, everything else goes to programs. And then we offset any of our admin time against the state contracts. So we actually run, I think, $36 million is oversight of the ASO contract with the Healthcare Authority. And then as part of that admin, we incorporate it. In the future, though,
These are expenses, but then you're saying there's revenue that comes in to offset these.
No, these are programs predominantly. There's very little administration or county general expense. Some liability though gets charged here. I mean, there's some things that are charged.
Okay.
Yeah, but for this community services side, this doesn't go towards FTEs, solely goes to program and or the support of that program. And we do have the 2026 budget that was presented to the board and approved. That is available. What we're talking about is like the 2027 projected. Certain things are changing and we're looking at what the state offset will be. That's where the challenge is.
But we make choices about what we wanna
Correct.
support in terms of programs.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, I would love to get that broken out, when you have it. Okay.
On mental health sales tax. And the next one is Heather's eye charge. I can barely. They're about my
You
glasses.
just wanna zoom into the very bottom corner. I feel like that's the number to focus on.
Heather will watch us through. This is the opioid funding coming over the next 15 years or so.
So for this one, this is just the updated, the biggest updates to this are our settlements 6 through 14, so the Purdue Sackler and all the other little ones did not come in last year, so they were moved from 25 to 26. We do expect, since they're settled, that we will get a payment here in 26. And I also removed the Spokane Regional Health District MAT OUD funds. So now instead of being in the negative in 2041, we do show a slight positive of 3.7 million. But as Justin and I discussed in our last update, it is our suggestion at this point that we do not program those funds until we know where we're going to be with the PATH Center. They just had the shortage of $500,000. We need to get the new center up and running before we consider doing any additional programming with those additional dollars. We do have the potential to have some more dollars depending on what we spend in admin over the next number of years. We could free up some additional dollars. So continuing to look at this as we move forward. But until we know what we're gonna do with PATH, I think it's a good chance to kind of just stay where we're at.
And how much have we budgeted for PATH then for the next?
Right now, all that's budgeted for PATH is 400,000 in ongoing operations. That
Plus-
won't begin till 2027.
Right. So there's 400,000 that we're currently providing to STARS, but then there was the original $200,000 annually approved, so we still have to come back forward to reassign those. It is originally $600,000 that we had set aside, but the ask still needs to come forward for the board for that 200. 400,000 is what we currently have projected the board last approved.
or path.
Correct, but
But we
the,
would switch from stars to pack
correct,
if we want to do that.
correct,
That's
because
it,
the timing of that, when we put those asks came over in different years. $200,000 still outstanding. Now, I am recommending, and it is projected to be used, so it would be $600,000 of those open funds, but that's still an ask that needs to come forward.
Some regards. Well, and then we have program down. This is just the revenue side.
Correct. I was trying to keep this short and easy. I took the projects off the bottom, but we do have our projects.
We can send that around.
Yeah, you can send that around.
Other questions on opioids? So we've hit all the sales tax, we've hit opioids, the next one would be property tax scenarios. This one actually came out a little bit easy to do in your head. Because roughly it's a penny a million. So you can kind of do the math there, but you'll see at the top, we already put together a 10, 20, and 30 cent option. We're currently right at 70 cents. So that's why the 10 would take you up to 80, the 20 to 90, and so on. And then we were asked about a $45 million, if we raised 45 million in revenue. So that would take us from our 70 cents up to $1.15 per thousand. And it comes in right at 45 cents additional. If you look at the bottom under the green, you'll see where if you had a $300,000 home, there's 211, don't get me wrong, your tax is gonna be about $3,000. But we collect for all the schools, for all the jurisdictions, libraries, the fires, only about 7 or 8% of what's collected stays at the county. So while we're gonna take 3,211 would stay. And $135 a year increase. At a 45 cent levy and a 300,000 home. And then you'll see at the 425,000 home, again, you're paying about 4,500 in taxes. The county currently keeps almost 300. It'd be 192 increase. And with the 650, you're probably paying 6,000 in taxes. Well, the county's keeping about 450, and it'd be almost 300 additional tax. If there was a 45 cent levy increase. But ballpark, you can figure each penny is about $1 million. And our maximum is what, like 80, I believe.
Correct.
So there's mathematically, there's a lot of capacity. Politically is a very different. Any questions on the,
So in the green, it's this plus this would get to what it would be. Correct.
for just the county portion,
Right.
that 7-8% that the county keeps? Actually, I wrote them out to be about $3,000 total for the 300, 4,300 for the 425 and 6,500 for the 650 this year. Total bill.
And a levy would look to say, it goes to the voters.
Correct.
Needs.
It would have to go to the voters at 50% plus one, unless you had some debt bonding as a part of it. And if there's an exempt as a part of it, then it's the supermajority. The
And
60 years.
limited to your time frame.
Yeah, we might wanna just double check with Jim on that. I think there's a time limit. What and from my conversations, there's like a 9-year time
Correct.
limit on the capital. However, there are other ways to.
There are no non-supplantation.
Yeah.
Rules around it. So with that, you could see where you could flex it.
And under these, the county receives all of the revenue unless we shared it by ILA.
Correct. No, 100% come to the county. Again, the difference in the supermajority and the simple majority is if there was a debt component to the ballot measure.
Sorry, can you say it one more time, the 45 cent, that's the max?
No, that's
That
just,
a
we
number you
were,
showed.
we were asked
Okay.
to go what a 45 million would
What
look
it would
like.
look Okay.
So the max is actually.
Max is 90, isn't it? 90
The
cents?
max is $1.80.
Yeah,
Oh,
but we already have
25
7.
cents takes us to $1.15.
Be about 10.
So the max would be $1.10
$1.10.
additional. So the max is
A lot.
a lot, right, honestly,
So
I think-
currently we're at what
70 cents right now.
max is.
Max is $1.80.
So the 210 sales tax we just talked about earlier would raise like 21 to 22 in total, right? Count. 13 for the count.
Correct.
So just as an example, or to kind of compare the different options, that you have the 20-cent levy lid lift would raise about 20 million total. So that's half of the, it's a little less than half of the 45 option here, right? So the average home under the 45 million levy lid lift would pay an additional $192 on their property taxes, right? So the 20 million, just to kind of give a sense of scale, would be like $80. Just to kind of compare that to the 2/10 measure that we have as another option. One of the things I was just going to note that when we look at these options is the 2/10 option has shrunk in the last couple of years, right? And we know the reasons. 13.3 million would be the county's share that we would raise. I was looking back at Measure 1 a couple years ago, some documents that Randy had given us, and I believe the jail plan, and Mike can verify, under that proposal was $540 million over, was it 20 or 30 years? 30. The annual bond payment on that would have been 18 million a year. So if you just think about a jail proposal, if it was similar to last time, if would be about 18 million a year, maybe adjusted for inflation, and we're talking about raising up to 13.3 for the county before any ILAs. So that suggests to me that phasing of the safe and healthy plan might be required potentially, just based on the limited options that we have. So I guess a question, Mike, is Carter Globally on the facility side is looking at our options. Do we expect that they're gonna give us options that could be phased out? Like an intake center or something like that, kind of breaking out facility
Yeah, we did-
needs into multiple steps.
We did talk about a couple of different strategies. How it's phased out depends on how we want to lay it out. I mean, is it a facility first, or is it programs first, or, so I'm a little fuzzy on how the rollout would be, but.
Do we have a time frame from them on what their report backs are going to be to the board?
It will be in August. Right, is that correct?
Targeting August 18th.
That's the target for kind of their final report.
You're gonna have a meeting in between there, with the facilities group. Between. So,
That is our last, so as you guys can think of a revenue that we slipped our mind.
I was just saying, so just to reiterate what you were saying is when there was the measure around the jail 3 years ago. Sales tax was a lot larger amount because in that time since then, both the City of the Valley and the City of Spokane lose their share. So the amount of money to bond or to use for services has shrunk.
I believe Liberty Lake is gonna put it on their ballot.
Oh,
They're taking that 110.
Okay. So.
And then I've heard people say Airway Heights too. I mean,
Every Heights already did it.
did they?
I think they did.
Did they already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard
So
they
it's
were
further
putting it up.
reducing.
Yeah, so.
Which is why we're having this conversation of looking at all these different options, because from my reading of the Safe and Healthy Task Force recommendations, there's a lot of different pieces and a lot of things that would require capital or operating. Like we have to look at a variety of options, not just what we were looking at 3 years ago.
It seems that the levy lift could be sized to need. But, you know, there seems to be, at least in my conversations with other elected officials, there's some skepticism about the property tax versus other options in terms of voter feeling on those things.
It's, you know, property taxes are just on the people within the county. Sales taxes, the people that are coming in and out. You know, so it's not just a burden on the people that are living here, so, yeah. Different thoughts and all of that, but yes. Dollars are continuing to dwindle as the different cities take their portion. So, because then they get a higher portion and we get a lower portion.
Maybe Measure One wasn't as bad as everyone said it was. Maybe.
You know, depending on
And
what the rollout looks like, what the safety, the safety of the task force views as what should be implemented right away. So.
right, but we have a almost $30 million deficit this year, but there's no way to do enhancements when we can't even hold where we're at. So that's the reality of my concern with the Safe and Healthy Task Force is like, yes, we can talk about all these things and have all these things, but if it's gonna cost dollars, we're not gonna have the dollars to do it. So how do we? It's gonna require some kind of additional revenue and truly sharing of all the citizens, because like what we saw in the mental health sales tax, it's benefiting everyone. It's, you know, there's a lot of comments that are made out there that it's just the county, they're not spending it across the cities, and it's like we are spending it across the cities. And I think that's the thing that people, you know, sometimes don't acknowledge. And so with the cities already taking their pieces, then they're not giving them, you know, helping the county back when we're covering a lot of those other costs for them. So.
And if you ask a lot of those naysayers too, it's like, okay, tell us what we're spending money on with mental health sales tax that should be spent somewhere else. Which of these things shouldn't be funded? And that usually ends the conversation pretty quick.
Yes.
I think in one of the things that I think and a lot of the other stakeholders seem to think makes sense from the Safe and Healthy report is the kind of foundational recommendation was this coordinating council to try to get that stood up, you know, as soon as we can. So that there's an ability to make sure that the variety of programs and things that we're talking about at the city and county levels can be coordinated, talked about, ways to collaborate. I know there's been some preliminary discussions with some of the other cities around like high utilizer initiatives, data. So I think there are things we can do, you know, as this kind of analysis, consideration of funding options continues to start making momentum while we figure out how to fund the future as well. So I'm hopeful we can get that done and move it forward as soon as we can.
There's some conversation too, because their desire to restructure the Spokane Regional Law Justice Council, there's some discussions that are going on. So I think it will likely have to sit down and have a conversation about that.
I mean,
Okay.
Exactly what you just said. I mean, one of my biggest concern was when I asked Judge Hazel about, I said, so are you when he discussed this, and I said, are you talking like the SRLJC? And he's like, yeah, but bigger with more people. And it's like the SRLJC was huge. I mean, hell, it was nearly a Congress, than as opposed to a committee, and now he's talking about that even bigger, and nothing came out of it. I mean, it's just folks would get together once a month, air their grievances, and then go back to their jobs, come back the next month and do the same thing. I mean, nothing came, and we had someone in place that, I mean, because they were saying, we're gonna need to hire an individual to be the facilitator to do the work, and it's like, we don't have the money to hire additional people to do the work. Back then with the SRLJC, we did have staff dedicated to that, and still very little, if anything, got done. I mean, it turned into a place for people to come and complain, and then they go back to work after the 2-hour meeting. I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm not excited about standing that back up. I mean, if folks want to go get together and do that on their own time, I mean, set a time, get together in a room, yell, complain, over your lunch break, and then go back to work. I mean, because that's all it was.
I think the hope is try to move past some of that baggage from the past. and that's
Throwing
why
more people into a room, I don't think is gonna work.
That's why we've had a very inclusive, energetic group that's been meeting for 9 months and has come up with a list of things that they think we should be doing.
Yeah.
So I agree that
There
we
was a
don't,
list that SRLJC had too, and it was called the Blueprint for Reform.
which was not, we could kind of relitigate the past forever and kind of throw our
I
hands
just-
up and say nothing will ever work. Or we can
Okay.
try to build on the momentum
Yeah.
that's been put before us now.
And I do think that it's different now than what that was, that was a new beginning of people trying to come together at that point. Because this group has already, I mean, I think they've seen that and saw how it didn't work, so then they tried to come together in a different manner. I think, again, to try to have money for the things, some of the things that we don't have that. So what are the things that can happen that people are, I mean, I'm seeing are honestly finally coming to the table to say, what can we do when we don't have any money to make it more efficient and more effective and better for people? So I think there is some momentum that has happened and is better than what the SLRG, like I never can say those in acronym, what that was.
You never
get it
right.
But if we don't try, we're not gonna know. And we don't have funding. I mean, if we don't have people really coming together to think how to do this differently and do it better, then we're gonna be worse off. So I think we do have some momentum. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. I mean, that's still just a discussion that we haven't even had. So I think there's more discussion, I think, from that group too, as to what they really think it's gonna look like. So, it's just still a concept, not.
Well, and
Further
what's the
developed.
purpose? Is the purpose to enact? Is the purpose to give direction? Because the direction is in the document.
I-
So-
I think it's to continue the discussions and the coordination, so that way they can give recommendations to us that they think could be beneficial. Like when Judge Hazel was talking about the soft handles, I think if they'll really sit down and talk about it, they can figure that out now. There's people in place that I don't think it's gonna cost any money, but we need them to continue that conversation to make it happen. So, and I think the continued conversation with the judges as to the timing of when they let people out. That they just they're not thinking through all of that. And so those are the conversations that I think the task force has been able to help. Are we gonna have programming? We don't have money for programming at this point in time, but what could that programming look like? They can talk about what they think that would be, and then maybe that's when the cities would actually come together with an ILA to say they'll help fund a portion of it. But if we don't have the conversation and we cut off the conversation, then we're never gonna get any further down the road. But I don't feel like we've had the conversation as to what that coordinating council is really gonna look like yet. Justin, you've been part of a lot of those conversations as part of the team, and I don't think there's been a coalition around what that's truly like, which is why we still want to continue the conversation.
That's what I was suggesting, that conversation. Needs to happen. I mean, yes, they're on JC by statute. You know,
Right.
that we have, is that adding chairs to that? And then the larger group is meeting out of the community as the CJCC and then reporting back. I don't know what that looks like, so there's a lot of different.
Yeah,
documents that we can do.
I think, but I think we want to continue to figure out what that could, what that could look like to make it really, make it be productive.
Because I think to your point, no pot of money that we just talked about, all different types of funding revenue is gonna meet all the needs. And so having a coordinating council that's all invested and hopefully could potentially figure out how to share revenue to get to shared goals, right? I mean, it's not, the county can't do it by itself, so.
Go back to the health.
I think one of the things I'm kind of hopeful for is that the health systems have been at the table in Safe and Healthy Task Force in a way that maybe hasn't been as strong in past efforts, and they bring their own funding streams as well to that conversation. So I think that's a value add as we try to think about moving the needle on where these issues intersect, right, of health and safety. But we could also kind of, we could talk about how a coordinating council looks for 6 months and not actually do anything. So I'm interested in trying to.
Sounds like regional homeless.
To action. So,
Yeah.
well, let's move is my point.
And I know I keep bringing up San Antonio, I know.
That's what was in my mind. I was like, in Texas, they had a lot of hospital engagement
they're-
and
they-
medical system.
They had their crisis committee, or I can't remember exactly what they called it, but you know, at their stabilization center, they had a group that fire hospitals, you know, when everybody met once a month and really talked about, you know, what was going on in the system, and I think talked about high utilizers. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but really had it come together. It was really driven by the electeds. We're not at the table, but we're the ones getting, behind the scenes, getting the information. So, I mean, as that looks like, you know, and then that's where San Antonio also had the intake center that was very robust, that didn't put people up in jail cells, that they're waiting for their first appearances instead of in a cell. So just different approaches. But I think that's part of what the assessment, the group, the lady is doing with the assessment, is thinking through all those things for us too.
But it has a report, from the State and Healthy Task Force as well for evaluation, if it was purposes too, so.
So
Looking at all of that.
will they be looking at San Antonio?
I
Where
asked
the
them to
intake
specifically,
center is there as
On my
a,
last phone call, I asked her to. Yeah. Because,
Yeah.
Richard Brooks had brought it up and I want to make sure that was one of them.
And I'm trying to get more information. Last week I asked Brenda to reach back out to them to get more info, so. We'll see. Cause I mean, that could be the way to phase, if we don't have much, if we can have something, have some money to do an intake center to alleviate some pressure now till we can do something more in the future.
So in terms of moving down the road around a coordinating council or whatever we're calling it, what would, since you and Commissioner Jordan have been kind of part of these other, you know, the electeds who've been kind of keeping the process going. Now that we have the task force recommendations, that was like one of their number one recommendations, is to move forward with a new form of a council that can keep the momentum going and hopefully do work for us at the county. I mean, we'll be a part of the council, but help drive ideas and potential, you know, revenue strategies and I guess I'm just looking to you, Commissioner Jordan and Commissioner Brooks, like, what would you suggest to keep that conversation going and coming back with some examples that we could look at for the coordinating council? You know, put some meat on the bones there.
I think at the last meeting of the kind of the elected group, I mean, they're thinking about that and trying to figure out what that looks like and how that looks.
GMI, the company we're working with, you know,
Oh, they were looking at some models
they
too,
have
right?
about 3 or 4 models
Okay.
they're gonna send forward. I think we've got it right now, we just need to look at it.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
we have-
Oh, that's what we
have
talked about.
two
That's right.
meetings on the books too, with the conveners of Safe and Healthy and with JMI, who's working with us on like community engagement funded by MacArthur right now to look at CJCC models and if there's a point where we can sort of combine the efforts of community engagement and Safe and Healthy to have a path moving forward. So, yeah, and Robin's worked directly with a few different CJCCs, like one in Helena, she said was, that we interviewed the woman who runs it, that's been hugely successful. She said there's a lot that they can point to that we can try to model after. Point. So it's just
Planning for it.
not finalized yet by any means, it's still a work in process. Okay. We have executive sessions.
2 executive sessions.
Okay, we probably should You going on
Thank you, Budget Office,
Oh, yeah.
for all your.
This was very helpful.
One is pending and potential litigation, no action, 20 minutes. Jeff McMorris, Matt Folsom, Nawal team. The second is evaluation of qualifications of an applicant for public employment. Yeah, McMorris, Matt Folsom, 5 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna go into executive session for approximately 25 minutes. For the reasons as stated, at the end of this 25 minutes, we don't anticipate any actions. So we will adjourn for the day and see everybody back for our 9 o'clock or so. Thank you.